Zant.
And I'm Elizabeth Stevens.
And welcome to Disney Villain Deathmatch.
Bum, bum, bum.
We have another special guest with us today in the studio, our friend Alistair.
Hello.
Hey.
I'm here to talk about villains.
You are.
I'm here to talk about two villains. An
Yes.
excellent villain, and also Jafar.
Rude.
I
Very
know.
rude.
I'm just coming with an agenda today. That's what this is.
Clearly,
I'm
yes.
so thrilled that Syndrome made it through the first round so that I get to talk about him.
Right, yes.
I'm not expecting to win. I'm not expecting to take the day here on Disney
Yeah.
Villain Deathmatch.
I think that's
But,
a good
you know,
expectation to have. Yeah. So today we are doing Syndrome from The Incredibles versus Jafar from Aladdin. And yeah, I'm pretty excited about this. This should be a lot of fun.
I'm interested to see how this will go. They're very different villains,
They're
which is
very,
always
very
interesting
different.
to me. And you know how I feel about those classic, iconic Disney villains. So I'm
Yes.
going to have a lot to say, I think, in the defense of Jafar, who I feel like, you don't have to defend a lion, right? You just let it go. Is that how it goes? The lion defends itself. You don't know that? You're
Nope.
both staring at me like I'm crazy. That's an idiom that people say. I think Lewis it might be a C.S. Lewis quote. I could be wrong.
Smart, wise people.
Right.
Is he
Cite
talking
that
about
idiom.
Aslan? Because I don't feel like you can equivocate Aslan with Jafar.
It was about, you know what? I don't remember.
You know what? You
I've
should have
just heard
saved
it
that
before.
for when we do Scar in a couple of weeks.
I don't have to defend a lion. Indeed. I'll say it again then. Everyone will laugh at the inside joke. It'll be
Yes,
great.
no, it'll be good. It'll be great. Okay, so let's get started. We're going to talk about, let's start with Alistair. What is your experience with Disney films?
I have a lot of experience with Disney films. I watched them, growing up in the 90s after the Disney Renaissance with Aladdin and Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast. Those
What
are
was
the
your
movies
favorite?
Aladdin was always my favorite, weirdly. I really liked Aladdin when I was a kid, and then that movie has not aged terribly well.
No.
Now, I think of the three that I just listed, I think it is my least favorite of the three. I think that The Little Mermaid stands up.
It really does.
That is a movie
Surprisingly
that
so.
has
Yeah.
become, I think, better through the years. And obviously, Ursula is a great villain.
So cool.
Maybe my pick for the final winner here. If I can look ahead here, on Disney
Yes.
Villain Deathmatch, maybe my pick for the final winner. But I think that Aladdin was always, I don't know, that pop culture aesthetic. Robin
Sure.
Williams gives a fantastic performance. The songs are magnificent. The plot is tight. Except that I just watched it again, and it takes like half the movie before we get to the Cave of Wonders.
Yeah.
It
It's
does take a lot of
slow
time.
burn
Well,
to get
we
there.
start there, right?
We do,
Yeah.
And
with
then it
our
takes a long
introduction to
time.
Jafar, which is
Sure,
actually
sure.
a really great villain introduction.
Yeah, I
It's
would
a
agree.
very strong, first foot forward by this movie. But then he just kind of loses his way at the end of the movie. And I'm less engaged by Jafar the further into this movie began. And as you guys discussed on your first episode about Jafar, in which he completely dominated the brilliant Robert Callahan from Big Hero 6.
Yes.
It's fine. This is a conversation for another time. But in your first discussion, you pointed out that Jafar is kind of held back by Iago.
Yes.
Yeah, Iago's
The
terrible.
worst character in
Yes.
modern Disney. He's just real bad.
Real bad. No, I would totally agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not good.
So he takes a hit there because, sidekicks are important. Employees.
Right. Yeah.
Your
I was
people
going to say,
management
I
skills.
feel like
Minions?
Syndrome
Yes.
doesn't really have minions so
Minions
much
is
as
the
he
word I
has
was trying to
employees. But yes. Yes, minions.
I mean, Mirage did a pretty good job, I felt like, but we'll get there when we get there. So let's
True,
go ahead.
but again, not a minion.
An employee.
An employee,
Yes.
which is
who did turn on him because,
Yes.
anyway, we'll get there.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so let's talk about our first impressions of these two villains. So, Alistair, what are your, you were already talking about it a little bit, but what are your first impressions of Jafar and then Syndrome, who I know is your guy, and I'm very excited to hear your defense of him.
I think it's really interesting that these two kind of occupy opposite ends of the spectrum here, because Jafar's introduction is magnificent.
Yes.
He is malevolent and he is brooding. He is immediately intimidating and immediately capable. He's just fantastic right from the jump. Whereas in The Incredibles, we get this introduction not of Syndrome, but of Buddy, of Incrediboy, which is a great perspective on that character, but he's not our antagonist.
Right.
Again, to call back to your first Jafar episode, you were talking about the fact that Robert Callahan is introduced before he is the antagonist, before he is, the villain of the piece. And that's a strategy that you can take. You can tell that kind of story, but it means that your antagonistic pressure on the plot is so delayed that you can't really attach to him. I think
Right.
the strongest and most iconic Disney villains are there from the jump. And Elizabeth,
Right.
I think you hit the nail right on the head, as is your way. This is really a contrast between classic Disney
Yes.
modern classic Disney, but still classic Disney, and like new wave Pixar.
Right.
These are very different stories. You know, The Incredibles is so much more ambitious, so much more sophisticated, so much more thoughtful in its construction than Aladdin.
Oh, sure.
You're giving a skeptical look there.
I just don't think The Incredibles is that great.
That's a shame.
I know that I'm in the minority, and that's fine. I just don't think it's that great. My favorite part, no capes. She is fantastic. Everything else,
Edna Mode is a classic character.
Yes.
She's very good.
so good. So good. I want one. I just want her to wardrobe me every day. It would be amazing.
That's how you get dressed for the podcast, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Basically, yeah. She's just chilling in the other room right now.
That's why none of us are wearing capes right now.
Exactly.
Like an app where you take a photo of your outfit and a little Edna comes up and just like critiques it a little
That's
bit.
amazing. That's
what you need is a
$1 billion
belt.
idea.
Yeah,
I
edit
love
that
it.
out of the
It's
podcast.
perfect.
We need to keep that.
Yes.
Cannot have. Dibs.
So, Elizabeth, what are your first impressions of Jafar and then Syndrome? You actually, you didn't watch The Incredibles whenever we did that episode.
When we did it, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I've seen him before, of course.
Sure.
And yeah, of course, he comes off at first as the little, I want to be your sidekick guy. And he is pretty much dismissed out of hand. I will
Yes.
I will give you that. And when he comes back, I feel like I was just never that. You never get that like chill in the blood when you see Syndrome. You know, he's emotional. He's over the top. He's overcompensating. I feel like just a bit. Anyway, so I don't feel that that Syndrome particularly gets a big emotional response from me. in
What about
his
Jafar?
introduction. Jafar definitely does. I mean, I talked about this before. I absolutely love the design of Jafar. I think he's second only to Maleficent. And of course, he was highly influenced by Maleficent.
Oh, yeah.
So that would be the reason why. I think, gosh, it's so twisty. The beard, right? I know that scene is gross. It's gross. I know. I'm sorry I brought it up. But the twisty beard,
I'm sorry.
the
To recap
super
that
long
scene for
chin.
those who haven't seen Aladdin recently, you're talking about the scene where the 15-year-old Sultan's daughter seduces the grown-ass man with her sexy feminine wiles and then makes out with him a bit.
Yup. Pussycat. It's bad.
It's
is what
not-
I'm
It's
saying.
not good.
It's yeah, it's very bad.
Uncomfortable.
This is while she is in her full slave Leia getup.
Yeah.
She's got her, yeah.
Yes, it is. Ugh. Yes. No. See, Jafar gives me the creeps. He makes my blood chill a little
Yes.
bit. I don't get that from Syndrome.
Okay, no, I totally agree. I think that those are both very valid points, and I can add nothing to that conversation. So let's move on to our next category.
I will say, in Syndrome's introduction, he is kind of interesting and engaging, and I think that we can kind of connect with Buddy, with Incrediboy at the time.
Sure.
But he is overshadowed, even in that opening sequence, by the brilliant kind of golden age comic book villain, Bon Voyage.
Yes.
Bon Voyage, one of the greatest supervillain puns ever. I cannot believe that there isn't just an entire movie built around that character. It's so good.
Good call. Good call.
So next we're going to talk about our villains' motivations. So let's talk about what it is that these villains are wanting to do. Why are they wanting to do this thing? Elizabeth, what are Jafar's motivations?
Jafar wants control of the kingdom. He wants to, I just need to rule it. I mean, it's pretty classic villain monologuing,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Yeah.
He wants an incremental upgrade, is what he wants. Because Jafar
about
starts this
incremental?
movie. He starts this movie as apparently like a world-class sorcerer. His disguise
It's
when he
true.
transforms into the old man to trick Aladdin into going into the Cave of Wonders in the first place. If you can do that, why haven't you already taken over this kingdom?
Well,
what are
this
you
is-
doing,
this is
Jafar?
his hubris, though, because he is basically in control, but he's the man behind the curtain. No one sees that he has the power, and that's not enough for him. People have to know that Jafar has the power. It's not enough that he be insidious and behind the scenes using his crazy rod to do the eyeball thing
Sure,
with the
yeah,
Sultan,
yeah.
where he's like, "Yes, Jafar, I'll do what you say." He needs people to actually bow to him and call him master and Sultan.
Right. Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, which is his biggest mistake, because I feel like if you're going to be insidious and villainous, then like the guy behind the curtain is definitely the place
That's
to be.
the guy to be. The man behind the curtain is the guy to be. Because when stuff goes wrong, people don't come after you. Nobody
Yeah.
knows about you.
Exactly. Yeah, they get the Sultan's head on a platter, and
That's
then
right.
you just get to still be the Grand Vizier whenever they put it
To
in
the
your
next
Sultan.
Sultan. It's true.
Yeah, but the problem is when you're the man behind the curtain, you don't get the perks. You don't get the parades. You don't get the flags. You don't get your picture on the money. You don't get
that's true.
15-year-old girls. Jafar.
But yes. Yeah, no, you're right. You're right.
I mean, that's
Excellent.
not a bad villain beat, I guess, that he is just so awful and predatory. It's it is a little uncomfortable. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's definitely gross. Super duper
It's
gross.
uncomfortable, but it makes him a stronger villain because
Sure.
it's so gross.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
You
Yes.
hate him even more.
Yes. So let's talk about Syndrome's motivations. Do you want to take that, Alistair?
I very much do, because this to me is what sets Syndrome apart from pretty much any other classic Disney villain. Syndrome has not just an agenda, not just strong motivation, but has like a philosophical construct behind it. He has a worldview. He wants to change the entire world, and he believes in a way that he is changing it for the better. It's incredibly arrogant, and it's interesting that both Syndrome and Jafar are incredibly hubristic, that they are both in the end hoisted. You know, they are brought low by their own arrogance and by their own inability to see their own limitations, which is actually a great character beat. That's a great villain character beat anyway.
I think it's a great character beat for just about anyone,
Sure,
actually.
Yeah.
Yes.
sure. But Syndrome has this perspective on the world. He wants the democratization of superpowers. If everyone is super, then no one is.
He's a
Right.
communist,
He
is what we're
wasn't
saying.
allowed to be a hero. And if he can't be a hero, then there will be no heroes. That's enormously profound, and he moves toward that with enormous capability. It's tough because we kind of skip over his development as a supervillain. We
Yeah.
see him when he's a kid, and then we come back when he's wearing his terrible tacky costume, and it's kind of unfair to compare the outfits here because Syndrome's is supposed to be bad.
It's supposed to be.
Okay, I
to
didn't
the
know-
inclusion of the
I didn't
cape.
quite catch that.
Yes, that's right. Specifically with the cape.
Yeah, it's the cape that kills him right at the end, to
Yes.
call back to Edna,
Yes.
the wisest person in the universe of The
I'm telling you,
Incredibles.
everyone needs an Edna.
But in that time, he manages to, he's a self-made man. You know, he is
Sure.
the Tony Stark of this movie.
Right.
Okay.
I was going to say Tony Stark gone bad, but Tony Stark did that on his own.
Yeah, I mean, not dissimilar, but he, you know, builds himself up. He stands in the shadows just as Jafar does until he's ready to kind of step into the light and become the hero, which Jafar kind of has that too. He wants to be adored. He wants to be, you know, celebrated and worshipped in that way. He wants, you know, the parade that Aladdin gets during
Yes.
the Prince
Yes.
Ali number. I mean, that's the kind of response that he wants.
Boy, it's a good sequence.
It really
It
is a
really
very
is.
good
That-
sequence.
Love the
stands out.
feathers.
Yeah. So Syndrome's motivation to me has always been completely fascinating. This idea of exceptionalism and anti-exceptionalism, I think this is one of the reasons that The Incredibles stands apart from me, is that it's just so thoughtful.
Yeah.
It's just so careful in its construction of a really thematically powerful narrative. And I love how that's embodied in, you know, the frustrated desire of a little boy who just wants to be a hero. He just, and not even a hero, wants to be, crucially, a sidekick.
Yeah.
He
Yes.
doesn't even want to be the star. He just wants to play his part. And he's just got all of this pluck. But that doesn't work in this world that has such a kind of negative view of exceptionalism, at least in
Yeah.
its first act. Yeah.
So let's talk about their lairs. And I think I'm going to side with Syndrome on this one because if I remember right, Jafar's lair was a dusty little room hidden back in the palace.
Oh, Jafar's alchemy closet?
Yes,
Yeah.
Jafar's alchemy closet. Yeah, he's got a
That
little cot
weird,
in
like,
there.
college dorm style red lighting.
Yeah, and like a giant hourglass that takes up like all of the room.
Okay, that part's pretty cool.
Well, I mean, it's not as cool as a literal volcano.
A literal volcano layer is pretty good. Like, particularly
good.
that 60s kind of like white plastic curved surfaces.
Like
super
James
spot.
Bond
Yes.
villain.
And
Yes.
he's got an
It's so
entire
good.
island. The whole island
whole
is
island.
his lair. And
He
it's
built a
very, very
monorail
good.
at some point.
Yeah, he sure
Good
did.
for him.
Yeah.
And there's traps everywhere too, right?
Yep.
Yes.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's pretty
Pretty
cool.
good. I mean, you might be able to argue that Jafar's lair is the entire palace, I suppose,
I don't think
as
you
Grand
can.
Vizier.
No, because he can't like skulk around being
Right.
evil all throughout the
True.
palace.
That's
like
the point of a lair. Like
Exactly.
a lair is where you do your villain
That's where
monologue.
you do your real brooding.
Yes.
Right,
Yeah.
yes, yeah. Syndrome can be at any point on that island and like do his dastardly schemes and come up with stuff and everybody's gonna like be like yes sirring all the day long
Sure.
at him, but that's not gonna work for Jafar because he's, you know, supposed to be in the shadows and supposed to be, you know, hiding behind the curtain and all this other stuff. So
Right,
he just
that's
gets
part of his
his he
duplicity.
gets his
Yes.
janitor's closet.
Yep.
How does the aesthetic of The Incredibles work for you, Elizabeth? Because this is this kind of 60s golden age,
Sure. Yeah,
part
and
super
that's-
spy, part, you know, golden age comic book. Does that work for you?
It does. No, I think it's a lot of fun. There's a lot about the movie that I like. It just doesn't speak to me in the same way that like classic, things that remind me more of fairy tales.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So or these grand old narratives that have been
Sure.
passed along for so long. So.
No, absolutely. I totally
Sarah,
get that.
as a comic book girl, are you caught up by The Incredibles? Does it?
When I watched it recently, when I rewatched it for this podcast, when we were doing that episode initially, I don't even remember who, Callahan, right? It was Syndrome versus Callahan?
No, it's Jafar versus Callahan.
Oh, who is Syndrome up
Syndrome
against?
versus the evil queen, and he won.
Oh, yeah.
The evil queen is really cool and iconic, but she just doesn't do very much.
She really does not do very much. It
Yeah.
accomplishes almost nothing.
Kind of a
Welsh
less
is
is more approach to
basically
villainy.
nothing.
Just like-
Yeah, that's right. Okay, I remember now because one of Syndrome's biggest thing is that he's killed at least 24 heroes
That's
and
right.
has certainly
Yes, he
achieved
has.
the majority of his goals. No, I think that I was really genuinely surprised by how much the movie still like stood up because, you know, I mean, it's what, like 10, 15 years old at this point? And really, really enjoyed it. And yeah, like as a fan of comic books and as a fan of like superheroes in general and superhero stories, I do think that it speaks to me a little more. But I mean, I also grew up watching the fairy tale Disney movies. And so I can also see the appeal of Aladdin. Aladdin I was never as into because Aladdin, we've discussed this before, is a Disney prince movie, not a Disney princess movie.
Right. I was
Fair.
going to say that when Alistair was saying it's one of his favorites, I was like, it's because you're a boy.
Yeah.
All the boys like
All
Aladdin
the boys
and
love
Lion
Aladdin.
King.
Yeah.
All the girls love
Which is
Beauty and the Beast.
totally
and
fair.
Little Mermaid.
Teen Alistair, that's true. But now
Right.
it goes Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, and then there's a gap. And then there's Aladdin.
Okay. Fair enough.
Right there at the bottom.
Makes total sense. No, I'm very into it. I think Moana is everybody's favorite now, right?
Oh yeah, definitely by some distance. It's actually bizarre to even talk about these films because we're talking about The Incredibles like it's a modern movie. More time has elapsed between The Incredibles and now than Aladdin and The Incredibles. Aladdin was 1992,
Wow.
The Incredibles was 2004, and now we're in 2017.
Huh.
Oh,
History
that's
is weird, time is a construct, etc.,
Yeah.
etc.
Also, we're getting old.
Oh, no. I refuse. Okay, so let's move right along. We're going to talk about Minions. Let's spend some time griping about Iago and how he is the worst and we hate him very much. And he does at least manage to fake Jasmine's voice to get Aladdin out of that one room so that he can snatch the lamp away from him.
That is such a weird power that Iago has because during that sequence, he imitates Jasmine's voice and then he also imitates Jafar's voice when he's doing the little back and forth with
Yes.
himself. Mm-hmm. That's such a brilliant power for Iago to have, and yet it doesn't appear anywhere else
almost
in the
never
movie.
uses it.
Yeah.
It's so strange. I thought for the longest time that the reason that I hated Iago was Gilbert Gottfried.
I was
thought
just
that
going to ask,
it
is
was
that
the
why, or
no,
is it actually
it turns
the
out
writing?
not. It's just the writing.
That's what I thought.
Why does Jafar have a parrot anyway? Why is that the beat that we have here?
Because it's a classic Disney movie and you need comedic relief. Although we had the genie and the magic
Parrot is
carpet.
a weird choice,
like,
though, now come to think of it.
yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess there are oftentimes birds in those kind of like, you know, grand Arabian palaces.
Sure.
But they tend to be like doves and things inside like the little
Or like a
apiaries,
peacock or
right?
something,
Or
right?
a peacock. Jafar the peacock.
That's very good, actually.
This white peacock with like
Oh my gosh, no, okay,
red
it's
eyes.
Gary Oldman in the Kung Fu Panda movie.
So much more evil if there's
It
just
is
this
more
white
evil,
peacock just kind of
actually.
following him around. That's, oh yeah.
who
I
like
can like
is
that.
pecking at people and it
Yeah.
doesn't even need to talk. It can just be like a really angry peacock that just attacks people relentlessly.
Are you guys familiar with the webcomic phenomenon Garfield without Garfield or Garfield
Yes.
minus Garfield?
Yes.
Where they've taken classic Garfield strips and removed Garfield in some versions, so it's just John Arbuckle talking to himself, or there are versions where they have Garfield and they've just removed his speech balloons. So it's John Arbuckle losing his mind at a cat that isn't in any way responding to him. I want an edit of Aladdin where you just take out all of Iago's dialogue. He's just a parrot now,
He's just
and
a parrot.
Jafar is crazy. And I think that would make him even more frightening.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I do think that we don't need Iago at all.
We definitely
yeah,
don't.
He brings Jafar down.
And now I'm
bad,
in this
you
weird
guys.
fantasy space where I just want to see Jafar's like evil white peacock fighting against Raja the tiger, who
There you
also
go.
doesn't talk. And you
That's-
just get a really neat fight sequence between these two animals.
Yeah, that's part of the problem, I think, in Aladdin is that we have Rajat the Tiger, who is great, and we
Yes.
have Abu, who is great.
Yeah,
And then
and
we
I
have Iago, who is terrible. And even the carpet works so
Yes.
much more effectively
I
than
love Abu.
Iago does.
I love Abu. He's so funny
As
and
you
great.
guys said, Abu, secret hero of Aladdin. Because
Yes.
if he didn't bite Jafar's arm when Jafar is, no kidding, about to shank the kid, he is just going to stab that kid and leave him to bleed out in the desert.
Yep.
If not for Abu, the movie would have ended there, and it would have been a little darker than it turned out.
A
in
much
the end.
shorter film.
Just
a
a much shorter
weird,
film.
dark Disney short film.
So minions are tough for Jafar because he also has his guards, the palace guard, I suppose.
Sure.
Who are completely ineffectual and not terribly impressive or imaginative.
Unless you're playing the Sega video game, in which case they're really hard to get past.
Yeah, the Syndrome.
By the way, I was on YouTube the other day and I saw that somebody has a full playthrough of the Aladdin Super Nintendo game.
Wow.
And I thought of you and I thought we need to get Elizabeth to do this because you're the only person I know on the planet who has ever beaten this game.
No, I haven't beaten
Alleged-
Aladdin. I bet
Lion King.
Lion King. Aladdin was really hard. I
no
don't
one
think
can
I
beat
got
that
out of
game.
the market
It's
for Aladdin. I was like,
impossible.
forget it.
Super
What am
Nintendo
I?
version of that game is trash. The Sega version of that game is the way to go.
Yes.
I played it on Sega even.
Yeah.
I just wasn't very good at it.
It's good. I mean, it's tough. I basically just played the first level a bunch of times.
That's
Yeah.
what I
and then you
remember.
get to the
Like, lots of
side-scrolling
apples.
levels with when you're on the carpet going through the cave
Yeah.
of wonder,
Yeah.
and that's impossible. And it may
Right.
as well be like a level from Battletoads. It's just impossible. No one has ever beat it.
Deep cut Battletoads
Thank you.
reference.
Thank you. That's why you bring me on a podcast.
I was gonna say,
Pedantry
I don't
and
know what you're talking
Battletoads.
about.
Tree of Battletoads. God, that's a very good name for a show. So let's talk about Syndrome's villains. So Syndrome also has like all of his guards that are all over the island, and
Yep.
they like exclusively work for Syndrome. I
Yep.
mean, the palace guards technically work for the Sultan,
They're
but
basically like Power Ranger putties, right?
basically, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So and then we get like his giant robots and stuff. I don't know if we count those as minions, but Mirage.
we definitely have to count.
Okay, all right,
The
excellent. No, I'm
Omnidroids, all the
super into
various
that.
revisions of the Omnidroid. Yeah, I think we definitely have to
Yes.
count that as his. And another minion that betrays him at the end.
That's true. Yeah.
is
Syndrome maybe
nice.
should work alone, is what we're learning. He may have done a lot better if he just hadn't needed all of these people to be under him and see how like great he was
Yeah.
despite his lack of superpowers. That's really interesting.
All Disney villains would do better with the aid of like a good HR department. Like you just need to hire, Susan and get her in HR, have her hire you minions for you. She can do all the paperwork. She'd be great at that.
Yes.
And then of course Susan would turn on you at the end of the movie.
Exactly. That's, yeah.
She stabs you to death with a letter opener.
I didn't file any of your tax paperwork.
Dang, Susan.
Curse you, Susan.
But then we also have Mirage, who, like we have already mentioned, does turn against Syndrome at the end because he straight up was going to let Mr. Incredible just snap her neck right there. He was like, whatever, do it. I don't care.
Yeah.
She means nothing to me. So
Mirage is fantastic.
Mirage is
She was very
great.
cool.
She's really
Also,
good.
that name's really cool.
A very good name.
I agree. Yeah.
It is, yes.
And
yes.
she's really capable, really smart, really excellent. I mean, if this is just like the minion versus minion, like Mirage, I mean, literally like kicks Iago into the giant volcano, and there's just it's not even a thing.
Yeah, it doesn't even like disturb her day.
Yeah.
She still makes it to like her 2:00 meeting. She's-
Exactly.
yeah,
Yes. Yeah. Not a problem whatsoever.
Weird incident with the parrot earlier. I handled it. It's fine. We're good.
It's totally
Yeah.
good.
And she's a well-developed character, which is
Yes.
vital.
I was gonna say, yeah, I remember her being really fleshed out and having vulnerability and depth
Yeah,
and complexity.
absolutely.
I liked her a lot.
Yeah, no, she's very, very good. A billion times better than Iago.
Yeah.
So next, let's talk about the means to their end. What were these villains willing to do in order to accomplish what they were wanting to accomplish? So Syndrome bought himself a tropical island.
How did
built.
he do that?
I don't know.
Well, we know from even the beginning of the movie that he's a technical genius. His
Yes.
introduction is, "Hey, I built these rocket boots. I can fly. Can you fly?" And
Also,
the
I'm
answer
like
is
9
no.
and I
I'm
built
like
these.
9 years old and I built these. I'm the prodigy that is Tony Stark. He is just a genius. He is a prodigy, and I have no trouble at all believing that he has sold weapons technology to
Oh,
pretty much
absolutely.
everyone in this
Yeah.
world.
Oh, fair.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think we even
Sure.
talked about that in the original episode, how he's
We may have.
basically Tony
Yeah.
Stark. Yeah,
Yes,
and so
yes, yes.
he's selling this weaponry. He gets all this money. He buys this island, builds a giant supervillain lair on it. It has a volcano. The volcano opens up into his dining room, which is
I feel
ridiculous.
like it's a really warm dining room at this
Maybe
point,
so.
right?
He must have
Probably
like
pretty
excellent like AC going
That's
on
what
in
I'm
there.
thinking. He also
Yeah, you
invented
can afford to run
supervillain
AC if you can afford to build a volcano lair. You can
Sure.
keep that thing at like a comfortable 72. But the great thing about that is ambient lighting for your dinner parties. I mean, that's pretty good. I mean,
That's
okay,
pretty good.
Candles, good. Fireplace, better. Actual volcano, there it is. Everyone looks real good in that lighting. Unit.
Oh yeah, that is
So forgiving.
because everyone's face is literally melting and you can't actually see anything. Everybody looks good when you're
Why
blind,
are you
I guess.
so wavy?
So Syndrome has this slow burn plan, this, I don't know, 20-year
Slow burn.
plan. Hey, there it is. This 20-year plan to establish himself as the world's premier supervillain.
Yes.
And then make the hero turn so that he gets the celebrity and the fame
Mm-hmm.
and all that goes with it. That shows some commitment. That shows some dedication
Yes.
right there. He's a good villain with
Yeah.
a good plan. And the construction of the Omnidroid and the way that he revises the Omnidroid by, killing superheroes.
At least 24.
At least 24 named superheroes. That island is, there's a reason that all the plants are so verdant. They've had a lot of fertilizer
I was gonna
in
say.
the form of, blood and viscera from these dispatched heroes. He knows what he's about, and he's doing it very well. And it really is just, if not for his hubris, he would have won at the end.
Well, that's
pretty
every
much it.
villain, though. You can't give him points for that.
He may be our Disney villain with the highest death toll, like for
I
sure.
think that
I don't
he
know
is.
if anybody else has killed that many folks.
It's possible, certainly. By the time you get to the Omnidroid attack on the city at the end, yeah, there's a pretty good chance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Frollo burned a lot of Paris, right? So
That's
that-
true. Well, he
that's
did
fair,
set
yeah.
all of Paris on fire.
Yes.
That's true. But
Probably
we don't
some-
want him to win. So
That's all right. He loses in literally every other category, including names. Frollo?
Frodo?
Frodo? No.
Frollo Baggins.
Frollo Babbins.
I think we broke him.
Frollo Babbins.
You really like that. Okay, so Syndrome, willing to like just murder the crap out of all of these people who are literally just doing good and
Pretty
trying
murderous.
to help
Oh,
people.
And can we talk about the last beat where he abducts a child?
Yes.
He's actually just taking Jack to raise him as his own sidekick. Mm-hmm. That's pretty malevolent. That's
pretty terrible,
evil
yeah.
there.
Kidnapping
yeah.
is bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Jafar. What is Jafar willing to do?
Again, he starts mostly behind the scenes, but he is running the show. He has completely taken all the agency from the Sultan
Yes.
and has is manipulating him and bending him to his will.
Yes.
He is willing to didn't he what was the thing with Jasmine with, he basically proposed, not even proposed, he convinced the Sultan that Jasmine would marry
Yes, he
him
hypnotizes the
via
Sultan.
hypnotism.
Yes,
Yeah,
hypnotizes the
this is
Sultan
very
and
bad.
says, "Oh no, actually, here in the rules on this giant scroll, it says that if you can't find her a suitor, she has to marry the Grand Vizier." And once again, we've talked about this before. Never trust anybody with the title Grand Vizier. They're
Right?
always bad
Did y'all
guys.
watch The Quest? If you didn't watch The Quest. Spoilers. Grand
Hey, you know
Vizier,
what? If you
bad
didn't watch
guy.
The Quest, get out of here. Get out of here. Go to your home. Go watch The Quest.
And then come back.
and then come back, please. We love you.
So yeah, basically hypnotizes the Sultan into giving away his only daughter to this evil, dark, and sinister man.
Right.
Um,
Oh, gosh, that's creepy. 15.
Chucks, 15. Chucks Aladdin to like the ends of the earth. First throws him into the ocean, then throws him into
That's
like
right.
Antarctica.
And like binds him with he's all
ball
tied
and
up
chain.
and he's got a ball and chain. Like he's straight up drowning this man alive.
Yes, yep. This boy.
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 I really hate that beat. When the genie comes to Aladdin as he's drowning and says,
Totally breaks the rules.
Oh, totally
I
breaks
can't
the
help
rules.
you. I can't
Yeah.
save you. You've got to just wish that I could save. I'll save you anyway. Whatever.
Yeah, we definitely
can't
talked about
work
that on our
ourselves
Disney
out of
Princess
this.
episode, where it was like, hey, none of these wishes actually track. He still has a third wish at the end of the film.
Yep, he
because
sure
you
does.
cannot wish for things when you are unconscious in the water.
Consent is important.
Consent is
Jimmy.
important.
Yes. So also willing to kill children is what we have.
Also
yeah.
willing to kill
Yeah,
children.
yes. Mhm.
Throws Jasmine into
And
a giant
or to-
hourglass. Is going to drown her in sand.
Yes.
Which is
That's
probably
pretty
even
bad.
Yeah.
worse than drowning in water. I don't know. Drowning is like one of the worst ways to die, I feel
still
like.
think the killing and the drowning in water and or sand is not as bad as the forcing marriage.
Yeah, well, also that's very miserable and
Yeah.
terrible. Yes. No,
Yeah,
naturally.
no, Jafar will do anything. I
Yes.
have no trouble at all saying that he has no moral event horizon whatsoever. He will do
Turns himself into an
anything.
all-powerful genie in order to achieve his ends.
Turns himself into a giant snake first, which, as we know from the evil overlord list, never helps.
Nope. Giant snakes. Bad juju.
Bad juju. Don't do that juju.
Don't do that, Juju. Okay, so let's talk about how our villains bit it. Once again, only one of our villains actually dies. So Syndrome dies by being sucked into a jet engine and turned into a fine red mist that spreads out across the atmosphere of the planet. Gross.
Yes.
More
he is
fertilization.
Killed by his cape, but also somewhat killed by Mr. Incredible throwing a car at his plane. So, there's that.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's eminently justified.
Sure, yeah, no.
What's interesting about Syndrome is that he is hoisted by his own petard twice over in this movie because he's removed from the attack on the city when he's supposed to be proving his heroism by taking out
Yes.
the Omnidroid. The Omnidroid has become too capable and too intelligent and disables his control mechanism, and then he is knocked out for the rest of the climax, which is an interesting move for the movie to make. And then when he shows up at the house and tries to abduct Jack, he threatens the Incredibles' family.
Yeah.
This is a personal hit. This is classic Pixar 4-act external conflict, internal conflict structure. It's beautifully, beautifully done, but he absolutely deserves his final fate. He is taken out.
Wow, he
by,
deserves to be sucked through a jet engine. That's harsh, bro.
Well, he's taken out by the exercise of exceptionalism is the thing.
Okay,
He's taken out by Jack's exceptionalism, by his super abilities. And then, Mr. Incredible throws a car at him.
Exactly.
He
Shape-shifting.
is.
Shape-shifting, general shape-shifting.
He's a morph magus, but for superpowers.
Gotcha.
He turns into the Human Torch, then he turns into Colossus, then he turns into a demon.
This is
Hellboy.
what I recall.
It's fine.
Yes.
It happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, he has the ability to turn into any Golden Age hero.
Basically, yeah.
Pretty good.
When he turns into Captain America, that's surprising.
Yeah, it was a weird turn in the movie. So Jafar, phenomenal cosmic power, itty bitty living space.
Right.
Yeah.
Destroyed by his own hubris. He's there. He's huge. He's gigantic. He's like swirling all these planets and galaxies together, and
Which
then he
is
gets
very cool.
It is really
Neat
cool.
piece
It's a
of
really
animation.
neat sequence. The color scheme is like really, really excellent there, and it's all very intense. And then just swirled down and sucked into this lamp, and So both the Robin Williams genie and Jafar act as though they don't. It's not like a Pokeball situation where you're shrunk down to like a microscopic shape and you've got like all this space within this little container
Yep.
that you're in.
No, you're
They
living
talk
in
about
there.
it gives you a crick in the neck, like it's really crowded, like your
Not
beak's
like
in my
I
elbow.
dream of Jeannie's little
right,
boudoir
yeah, no,
downstairs where she
doesn't-
had all the pillows
There's
and
no
stuff.
boudoir for Jafar.
Yeah.
This lamp is what I'm saying. So now this genie is forced like into this very uncomfortable position and then just chucked out into the middle of the desert, which I feel like is worse than death because also Iago is there.
If it wasn't bad enough.
If it
There
wasn't
it
bad
is.
enough.
For all my complaints about Aladdin and for all the ways in which that movie doesn't hold up as well as it might, the final beat is fantastic. Aladdin outsmarting Jafar
Yes. Yeah.
is so good, and there is a real sense of justice.
Yes.
He gets exactly what he wants, but it isn't what he expects.
Yeah.
That's a good villain turn right at the end of the movie, yeah.
I would definitely agree. Yeah, I like that very much.
Yep, it's very, very good. Okay, so we are now finally at our very last category here. And like we decided last week, rather than set up some scenario where they have to rescue a princess or Tony Stark or whatever, whoever we decide a damsel, we're literally going to put Jafar and Syndrome into a gladiatorial arena. Who wins?
Do they get their stuff?
They get their stuff. So Jafar has his magic powers.
Is Jafar
a genie? That's a good question.
This is what's really
Well,
important.
if Jafar is a genie, then it's very easy. Because Syndrome walks over to the little lamp that is resting on the floor of this gladiatorial arena, rubs it, and is Jafar's master.
Ooh.
Done. He literally wins.
But no, I think in this scenario, you do not put the lamp in the gladiatorial arena. You
The
put,
end of Aladdin tells me that being bound to the lamp is a fundamental part of being a genie, that those two things are
well, in
inextricable
this
from one another.
scenario, Sarah and I rub the lamp and say, our greatest wish is that you enter this gladiatorial arena with Syndrome and then go
And
back
fight
into
to the
your,
death.
Pretty good,
and then
pretty
go back
good.
into your lamp.
Pretty good.
Thank you.
That's a very complicated wish. Okay,
Yes,
yeah,
that's
so
the
all right.
Second wish is go back into your lamp forever now. Well,
Yes.
then we have one in the middle.
Okay, so Syndrome cannot get to the lamp.
Yeah, Syndrome
all right.
is not in control. That's
Yes.
yeah.
Okay, does Syndrome have his Omni droids?
It doesn't matter. If Jafar is genie empowered, then Jafar wins. I mean, that's
It's true. If
I
he's a
agree.
genie.
an unimaginable amount of cosmic power, although it's unclear again.
But then again, we can't go from the end because if we go from the end, Syndrome is already
dead
dead.
already.
That's true. Okay, all right, let's start. Okay, let's
So
start
how
when
about
we-
at the height of their
height of their villainy? Sure. So
At the
whenever
height of their villainy,
okay, so
sure.
when Jafar is like super sorcerer, he's got like the white robe,
greatest sorcerer
yeah,
in the
greatest
world.
sorcerer
Yeah.
in the
Okay,
world,
okay.
versus Syndrome when he has built his latest Omni droid right before Mr. Incredible shows up and throws a monkey wrench and everything.
I like to think that Syndrome would be able to anticipate what Jafar would do and would at least put up a fight, but I
No,
don't
this is a
see
hell
the
of a
kid
match.
winning.
I kind of want tickets to this show, frankly.
It would be really good, is the thing, because I mean, this is we deal with this a lot actually over in the MCU. We're now dealing with like magic versus science,
Yes,
right?
exactly,
And I mean,
exactly.
it's at some point though, Jafar I feel like is going to be able to use magic to, I don't know, trap Syndrome in like a bubble of water, or
Sure,
make the
he's
ground
very
come up
powerful.
and eat him,
Because
or
he's not bound by the same rules. Fundamentally, Jafar's power is magic. He's a
Yes.
spellcaster.
Yeah.
He's manipulative, but he's not, I mean, terribly, terribly good at it without the magical
the aid.
hypnosis
Yes.
augmentation there. Syndrome is a legit genius.
Yes.
A legit actual genius. And I think that he would be able to, here's the thing, if Aladdin can outsmart Jafar, Syndrome can definitely outsmart
yeah.
Jafar.
Well, and here's the other thing. If they're like, if it wasn't like this magical gladiatorial arena that we have put them into, and if they just showed up like on Syndrome's island, like, or like in the city or anywhere, they probably would just team up. Okay, you can't keep using that as the excuse when we're having these villains fight each other. Sorry. They would both kill the princess. What do you want? That's not what the show is. Yes, they would kill the princess. But yeah, I think that, yeah, I feel like if it weren't for the fact that, I mean, Jafar is now the greatest sorcerer on the planet, that Syndrome would have a pretty good chance. But no, it has to be Jafar.
I do think it has to be Jafar.
Yes.
And not only for the gladiatorial arena, but overall, I think it has to be Jafar.
I mean, Syndrome definitely wins
jumping
for
ahead
Lair.
to final judgments? We're making the case right now?
I feel like I haven't had my cards too close to my chest this whole time. But yes, okay. Strictly in the gladiatorial arena, I think greatest sorcerer in the world beats really smart kid with gadgets.
Sure. Yeah. No, naturally.
Fair.
Good show. Again, I would watch this on pay-per-view or whatever
Yes.
it was. But yes.
Yeah, it would either be amazing or very, very brief.
Yeah. I mean, it could be at least interesting in the beginning.
Oh no,
so.
Jafar cast spontaneous combustion on Syndrome. And you just watched a kid burn to death. He's not a kid. We should say he's not a kid.
Yeah,
By the
he's
time
like
we
a
get to the
20-year-old
climax
man.
of the movie, yeah, he's a fully grown supervillain.
But yeah, even with all of the other categories that we've gone through and looked at, I think that the only one where Syndrome like definitively won was with the Lair. But otherwise, they're relatively well, and also the murdering of a lot of heroes.
The murdering of a lot of heroes. He definitely wins minions. He definitely wins motivation. I think Jafar's motivation is just not that impressive to me. He wants more power, but he already has a lot of power. And it doesn't really, beyond the fact that it's just classic villain motivation,
right.
Syndrome takes that from me because Syndrome has this, as I said, this
Like a
completely kind of
philosophical worldview.
founded philosophical worldview and wants to make that happen. He wants to change the world. And, we made a couple of Dr. Horrible references here in the span of this podcast, but that seems to me to be an appropriate point of comparison there. Here's the problem, as I see it. Syndrome is a better character. He is a better antagonist. He is more complex, more sophisticated, more ambitious, more engaging. And the story works better for that. But he's not a villain. He's
That's what
not
it always comes down to.
Wearing twirly, twisty, bearded villain. So while Syndrome is a great character, he's not what you go to for Disney villains.
Yeah,
I just don't think that
he can't.
does
He
the thing that Jafar does.
ultimately hoist the Triwizard Cup or whatever it is that we're giving these guys at the end. Yeah.
What are we giving them at the end?
I don't know. We should think of a prize, though.
Some sort of princess's head on a pike.
A princess of your choice.
Wait,
Step
they
back,
did
Jafar.
that movie.
Step back.
Not your choice. No.
Sorry, Jafar's not going to win. It's fine.
So do we feel pretty good about saying that Jafar should win this?
I vote Jafar.
I also vote Jafar.
I think I'll vote Jafar, honestly, because of that distinction. I think Syndrome's a better character.
And it really does come down to that a lot.
Villainous.
We come to that a whole lot where it's like, well, they're a better antagonist, but they're not a better villain. So it's really interesting. I don't know what it is exactly, but there's something very interesting in that we have this like sort of innate understanding that there is a difference between like an antagonist and a villain. And
there's this old trope that, everyone is the hero of their own story. And you can absolutely see that in Syndrome. As far as he's concerned, he is the hero. He is changing the world for the better. Jafar has no illusions about his heroism. He knows that he's not the hero of anyone's story. He's the villain. And that's
really interesting.
That's a huge distinction, I think. And you'll generally see that. Ursula has no no false modesty there. She doesn't believe that she's a good guy. She doesn't believe that she's trying to secretly save the world. And I think that that's what sets the really great villains apart. They kind of revel in their villainy.
The being evil for the sake of being evil tends to have a lot of points in something like this.
Which, as you guys have discussed, doesn't necessarily make for stronger stories. It doesn't necessarily make for better movies, but it is what you're discussing here on DVDM. So I think
completely agree.
Jafar has to take it.
Let's pull up the list real quick and go ahead and punch that in. All right, so Jafar is our winner. We're going to go ahead and put him here as the winner of this round. He is going to be going up against Ursula.
It's going to be great.
It's going to be really good. Does anyone have any guesses who's going to win that? Ursula.
I think I hope for Ursula. I think, but I wouldn't be surprised if once we start talking tactics, it gets to be a closer match.
Oh yeah, that's true. Ooh, it's gonna be so tricky.
I don't know. This is world level sorcery versus world level sorcery. I think that Ursula is going to take it in pretty much every category. I think she's
Flossie
got
and
it.
Jetsam are a million
Flossie
times
and
better than
Jetsam
Iago.
and
Okay, we
Hilaire.
can't do
You
this
know, we
now.
can't
No,
do this
we'll
now.
have a whole
Can't do
episode
this now.
dedicated to this.
Yeah, Ursula's the one to beat, though. I agree.
For
Ursula's
sure.
the one to beat.
Yep. But that's not what's going to be happening next. Next time, in a couple of weeks, we're going to be doing Scar from The Lion King versus Captain Hook from Peter Pan. And we are going to have our other resident pirate expert, Daphne Olive, on the show with us as our guest for that episode. That's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to that. Yeah, gosh, how many more rounds do we have until we determine like the final winner?
5 more rounds. You've
Wow.
got Scar versus Captain Hook, Frollo versus Maleficent, Ursula versus Jafar, and then the mysterious round 14, which will be Scar or Captain Hook versus Frollo or Maleficent, and then your grand finale. You guys are getting close to it.
Oh, man.
So exciting.
I'm really,
like
really excited. Yes, this is going to be so good. Thank you guys so much for listening to the show. If you like what we're doing over here, if you want to support us and help us do more work like this, you can head on over to patreon.com/Common Room Radio, where you can kick us $1 a month or whatever you can afford. If you want to join in on the conversation and tell us what you think about these villain death matches, you can use the hashtag DVDM over on Twitter. You can find us on Twitter at Common Room Cast. You can find me over there at Elsa Grab the Salt.
I'm at Lisbeth Ray, 555.
I'm at Paper Bullets.
And I think that's going to do it for us this week, right?
That takes care of us.
Awesome. Okay. Well, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks so much once again from Common Room Radio. I'm Sarah Kate Bazant.
And I'm Elizabeth Stevens.
And I'm Alistair Stevens.
Bye.
Bye.